Welcome back to Calvary Life. This is the podcast of Calvary Baptist Church and the members of Calvary Baptist Church and anybody else out there interested in local church life. I'm Charles Uptain, the executive pastor.
I'm Paul Thompson. I'm so excited. It's been 2 weeks since we've done a podcast.
That's right. We are excited to be back in a very exciting time at Calvary, just as we think about the future. And something that you, Paul, mentioned a couple of years back, actually, is when we really started, bringing this idea to the church of us thinking about the next growth pattern for the church is to plant a church. And so, of course, in the members meeting Sunday night, we got to just bring the subject up to the church to be praying about and that kind of stuff. So I thought we'd have a discussion about church planting today, how it's different now for us and what we're thinking about versus what maybe we've done in the past. You know, we've been a part of 4 church plants since I've been here. I'm not, one since you've been here. I guess the other 3.
Yeah, those were in play already up and going, running.
Yeah, so we had Dothan Country Fellowship and
Still going.
Southern Community Fellowship, which was at first in right side of Campbellton or something like that, would be the right city in Florida, and now their autonomous church went to Chipley. I kind of have lost touch with them since they became an autonomous church there. And then we had Iglesia Bautista de Calvario, which is our Hispanic-speaking church, and of course it's still right down the road from us, and still a ministry of Calvary. It's not on its own, as in they still meet in our building and those kind of things, and we help them with some administration things. But really, Dixon and his team there does a good job without us, pretty much.
Yeah, they're functionally independent. You know, it's good for our people hearing this, particularly our Calvary folks. This is helpful for anybody in any church that's thinking about church planting. But I think it's particularly helpful for the Calvary people to hear that we actually did start talking about this next phase of church planting a couple of years ago. And the reason I want people to be reminded of that is this: when we were talking about it back then, it wasn't opportunistic. It wasn't just because here's an opportunity that's just been thrown in front of us, and man, maybe we should do something with this. It wasn't that way. It was much more, even though it was theoretical at that time, sort of hypothetical. It really was. It was a theological purpose. I mean, we were thinking through these things, thinking this is the right thing for us to do. We need to start praying about this. Really, then it was more convictional. We were saying a healthy church really ought to be planting other churches,
right?
And kind of connected to what you were saying with the previous churches, not just sending out a church planter with our blessing and with our financial support, but actually as a church, we should be birthing other churches. And so, we started praying about that and talking about that, and I think it really started from a good place. This is something we should be doing without knowing how or where or when, but trying to set some goals. And I think that's important for folks to hear too. It's not so much like a vision statement. We produced something we called Calvary Next, but it wasn't so much like, okay, God's given me this vision and I've spoken to out of a cloud or something. It was more of a collective sense of us all praying and talking and thinking, what should we be about? Where should we be headed? And with that, let's put some legs to this. Let's put some goals. Obviously, that's all in God's timing. He's sovereign over those things. But so when you look at those Calvary Next things, if you're a Calvary person, it wasn't us trying to give something prophetic in the sense of we feel like God is going to make these things happen necessarily. It was more of we feel this is necessary, this is healthy. And if our church is becoming healthier and healthier, which we're always aiming to do, that's not a fixed spot on the map, so we're always aiming at better and better health. Wouldn't it make sense to be part of planting or replanting or revitalizing churches similarly, with a similar DNA, with the same sort of principles and values, and setting them up to succeed in a healthy way? So that's kind of where it started, and now here we are 2 years later, and we've actually got a very real, solid opportunity right here in front of us.
Yeah, and with that, one that we didn't mention, the one that we of course helped start while you were here, which is Steve's church. Steve in New York, the church plant up there that now has become Neighborhood Church Upper West Side is the name now, was Grace City. And so that church plant, really was the opposite of what we're looking at this one, because it's a church plant that's way away from us. It's a church plant that we're not really and did not really, I guess we talked about and tried to get the congregation to think about anybody that could go with Steve and Tony and their family, but it wasn't predicated on somebody going with them
Right.
as a team. And so that church plant was we're going to send out a planner, so to speak, and I guess that's kind of how, even with your going to the North American Mission Board and their training and their resources and everything, and Steve's training, that's kind of what they suggested, right? I mean, that's kind of the normal church planning trajectory for that.
Yeah, kind of thinking back, really that was more driven by, at the time, Steve's sense of calling to plant a church. So it wasn't so much the church feeling this need, this sense of our mission is not fulfilled if we don't plant a church. It was more of, man, I really feel like, and I'm summarizing, of course, but I really feel like God's leading me to plant a church, and I'm thinking about this. What do you think? I said, well, let's go explore. Steve and I went to the conference, and we sat and listened. I think that really, really stirred it up. I knew Steve was all on for New York when we were there, because one of the little things they did was wherever you were seated in this conference, at every seat there was a baseball cap already there, and the baseball caps were representative of the cities that were cities at the time of greatest need. So I can't remember what we got, but like we're sitting there, I think maybe a Cleveland Indians hat, and I don't remember what the other one was. And Steve quickly went and found somebody in the room that he could exchange his hat with for a New York Yankees hat. So he was playing his hand early on. But no, it was different. It was like you're saying, with our participation in it, it was almost like it was optional. Steve's going to go. We support Steve. We support his calling. We want to be part of that, help make it happen. Is there anybody that'd be willing to go? But Steve was going to go with or without people. What we're talking about now is something very different. Instead of just an individual sort of taking the lead and saying, hey, will you guys help me? I'm going to do this. Does Calvary want to be a part? Will you be a part? It's more of a church saying, we think fundamentally that we need to be doing this till Jesus returns. We need to be looking at planting healthy churches with a conviction that it's not just the highest populated areas, the most densely populated areas, wherever there are people, in the language of one of the articles we read recently, whether it's a small town or a village, a gospel-preaching, Bible-centered, healthy church needs to be there, and those needs exist even around us.
Yeah.
So where can we plant a church with our people?
Yeah.
And where can we facilitate the development of a new church where maybe some of our people are coming from? We're not super regional, but we do draw people from around the Wiregrass. We have people that live, in different
15,
directions.
20, 30 minutes away, yeah.
And pass a lot of churches on their way to us. That's not an indictment of those churches. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying, what if we could say to those folks, hey, we're looking at planting a healthy church that's very close to you, that you could be very involved with, that you'd be right there in your own community, your own neighborhood. Would you be willing to be part of that?
Yeah. And I think it just makes sense, sometimes it just comes back to resources, because we have to make decisions based on resources because we don't have an infinite amount of those. And so we have this campus, we have parking for this amount of people, we have so much that we can do on campus. But if we want to really think about multiplying, as in growing believers, growing disciples, we're not full by any means, but we are reaching that point where we would have to start making other decisions if that's what our growth was going to be at 901 Montezuma.
Yeah, and so this is a big one. This is a big question, and this is where I'm kind of hoping that the audience for this podcast will be large. Will include a lot of our Calvary folks, because the question will be, well, why not just begin another service? We could, like right now, all the Calvary folks know, we explain this to guests, we don't have our primary worship service on Sunday mornings. We have a Sunday evening service in our sanctuary, but we do Sunday mornings in the fellowship center simply because it holds more people, has more seats. We can all fit easily, comfortably, and there's some room for growth, keeping one service. So, of course, folks are always going to say, plus this is what we did for a long time. Why don't we just go back to 2 services? And if we grow beyond that, get out another. It's, you have almost unlimited growth that way. But it is our conviction, not just our preference. It is our conviction that the church is a body of believers gathered. That gathered body of believers is the church. We gather together as a body, as a family for worship. And that's best signified, best practiced in one gathering. One gathering means a lot to us. It's not just what we think is easier this way or better this way, or no, we think it's necessary this way. And I mean, we're not going to be legalistic with it. I'm not throwing out judgment to other churches that choose to have a couple or whatever. They have to make that decision. We think for us, that one fellowship, that one gathering is the healthiest thing we can do. And it does facilitate the other growth. So if that gathering becomes so large that we can't do it anymore, then what is our next move? Our next move is not to say, well, can we take out this wall? Or can we build another building? Or can we double up services or triple service? It would be, let's plant another church.
Yeah.
Let's look at an area that maybe doesn't have access to a healthy church or a sound church. And let's look at church planting and let's send people back into those neighborhoods. So, our next phase of growth is going to be that. It's not going to be here.
Yeah, and I think that really fits in also, one thing that has been part of just Baptist church culture, South church culture, is the idea of, the competition between churches. But what I've very been thankful for your leadership and the leadership of our church is that we want to be partners with other churches, not competing. And so and because of that, then I think that fits into the model of starting other churches that we can partner with well.
Yeah.
We're not worried about everybody coming here. We're not trying to be the biggest and the best, so to speak. We want to do things as best we can, but really we understand that the gospel is bigger than our church.
And there's so many benefits to that too. So many downstream benefits. Training up new men to be elders. Developing people called into vocational ministry. Getting people to use their spiritual gifts. We're not a huge church by any measure, but even a church our size, it's easy to just come and participate, not use your spiritual gift. And maybe some people are thinking, well, I don't know, is there a need for me? I don't know what my place is. Well, ultimately, ideally, everybody needs to be serving using their spiritual gifts. And maybe in a new church plant, you can find that role. But having a way to develop new people and to send people out is as healthy as can be. And also, just the reality of reaching unchurched people seems to work better. We just know historically, new churches and freshly planted churches do a better job typically than existing churches, but also being close in those communities, being where people are. All those things are factors that help, and we want to do that. We want to be a church that does, in fact, raise up leaders, sends leaders out. That's not dependent on one or two key leaders, for its health or for its identity or anything like that, sending those people out in good, healthy ways. And then, like you said, I'm filling in some things you're not, because I want people to hear this just in case they're not clear on these things. We're not talking about establishing satellites. So we're not talking about establishing new venues, multi-site, where either I would be or someone else on staff would be preaching like on video or something like that. We're talking about self-sustaining, autonomous churches that would be in good partnership with us, but that we're invested in deeply because we believe that, and without arrogance, hope this doesn't come across as proud or arrogant, we believe that things we're doing are the right ways to do things. We do these things out of conviction, not just preference. So that the way that we're doing church, what we believe about ecclesiology and leadership, elder leadership and congregational government, what we believe about preaching, expository preaching and teaching, what we believe about missions and the gospel, all those things would show up in a new place. And so we want to ideally be able to look down the road and say, look at this network of sister churches that we have that we can just partner well with, that we can share resources with, that we can benefit from each other from. I think that's the ideal. So
with that, back to the elder led, that's something that wasn't quite in place when Steve left. It was in the process, but as I remember, it wasn't quite. Where the church
his starting up was coinciding with us just really beginning.
Right. So with a new church plant, how is that elder led multi-pastor idea? And not just idea, but like you said, conviction, biblical conviction for us as a church. How is that going to affect the church plant? I mean, what is that going to look like for us now versus maybe what it looked like with Steve?
Anybody that would be a church planter from us would be an elder of us. So whether that's somebody who's not an elder currently and is in process of becoming one, whether it's somebody that's listening that feels called to church planting, we'd ask them to come go through that process with us and become an elder with us. We want to send out those who are elders, but also in the initial stages, those newborn stages of the church, their elder leadership would be ours. We would be providing that leadership and helping guide them through identifying potential new elders and training new elders, because part of their part of their steps to independence and autonomy would be having elders, not just one pastor, but having elders in place. That would be part of that downstream checklist for them. Are your elders in place now? That sort of thing. So elders sent out, elders trained up, new elders trained up, elders established to lead, I think would all be critical to the process. So we'd be able to say, both to our people and to a new community, we're sending out our leaders. And that's another challenge to our church too, which we talked about. I mentioned a little bit on Sunday in some articles I posted on social media today. We need to be, as a church, okay with the idea, not just intellectually but emotionally, of sending out some of our best people.
Yeah, that
just needs to be a shift in thinking a little bit. We may be sending out some people who have been very critical to us here. Maybe we're sending out excellent life group leaders. Maybe we're sending out, just key volunteers that have really been instrumental in ministries. Maybe we're sending out an elder or two that has been very beneficial to somebody in their life personally, ministered to them well, people you've looked up to. We want to do that. We really want to raise good people up, and then a bittersweet but a necessary launch. Goodbye. We want to see you go. We want to be partners with you. We're going to be praying and supporting you and encouraging you, and we'll be celebrating your successes there with you.
Yeah, so I think that points to the what can our church be doing now? What can our congregation be doing? You mentioned prayer. I think that's one of the big things we mentioned Sunday night is be praying about this, the steps going forward, because we're not there yet. We're still looking at details, looking at just really want to make sure that this is the right in every way, where we need to go. So we're praying for that. But also in that, I think the church needs to be encouraging others and encouraging towards that atmosphere of being okay to lose some of those people. Yeah. And so I think that's a big thing the church can do right now.
And the church is going to have to be, as a whole, we all are going to have to be willing to take on some risk. There is risk involved. There are financial costs involved. And we need to be willing to do that. Some will say, well, what about our own budget? What about our own needs? And it's not like we're sitting on just piles of cash. We have all these extra. If we wait till that day's not going to come. Maybe this is a bad comparison, but it'd be like a young couple that really wants to have children. Are you going to wait until you have saved up for college and you've got money for the first car and you're going to wait? No, I don't think many of us are able to do that.
Yeah.
You do it. You jump in and the church is going to have to take some risks, some financial risks, some people risks. We're going to send people out. There's no guarantee of success, but one of the reasons we're doing it the way we want to do it, or how we're trying to get this going, is to mitigate risk. We want to be as hands-on as we can. We want to nurture it and guide it. We're not just sending people out with our prayers and with some paychecks or some financial support saying, hey, we hope you make it. We're going to be in it. We're going to be invested in it. Yeah. And so our people really pray for it. Be willing to sacrifice for it, to give towards it. Be willing to see some shifts in budget even going forward, that maybe some things that, well, why don't we do this? Well, it's because we're doing this.
Right.
See it as our success. That's going to be a big challenge. See what happens, like, for instance, right now, the place where we're talking, I don't know if I should even talk about it publicly yet because it's not public and we're not in there yet, but see where we're going there as our success too. This is the body of Christ's success. This is a Calvary success. It may not mean new landscaping and fresh paint and things on our walls. It may be someone else's. It may not mean more people being baptized here or as many. It may be it's happening there. All those are good.
And isn't that healthy though? Aren't we called to sacrifice? Aren't we called to give up some of those things like that? That to me sounds like healthy Christianity, to say that we're going to maybe sacrifice a few things that we enjoy here or whatever. And I don't think it's going to be a humongous sacrifice, but just to sacrifice those things for somebody else. That's just, I think, healthy Christianity.
And isn't this what we've been doing internationally for a long time? We've been willing to do that internationally. That seems like an easy sell for us. I couldn't tabulate on the top of my head. I know we shared some data recently on what we did this past year totally in missions outside of us and what part of that was international and what wasn't. But, it's significant. I think we need to be willing to do some of that local and regionally as well. So, just looking at that, that's good. We may not do this project here because we're doing that project there. And good. Those are good decisions. Those are good things to think about. Why do we not want to, say for our sanctuary, Why do we not want to spend $1 million and take out a back wall and add a few hundred seats? Because that's, over 5 years or 10 years, that's $100,000 or $200,000 a year that we wouldn't have for ministry and mission and church planting.
Right.
So what's a better priority? So it does figure into our priorities and values too.
Yeah, and so another thing I think leading in that financial reasons or financial things to do is our spring mission offering. And you got me to mention that just at the end of the members meeting because it's now upon us. It's what we used to call our Annie Armstrong Easter offering, and we still plan on giving half of what we take in to the Annie Armstrong Easter offering, which goes to our North American Mission Board and church planting. So that's our church planting around North America. But this year at Calvary, we're doing something new. We're going to take the other half, and we're gonna put it into a fund for our own church planting here. So I hope everybody will just launch that well. That we will see. Maybe I think we can raise in that spring offering more than we've ever raised before. Doing it this way and having a goal, having something there that really pushes us, but also because we know it's going to be for the benefit of this new church plant that we're doing.
Yeah. So it's a big challenge. We put a big challenge out there in front of people. This is not less than before, even to North American Mission Board. It's actually more. If we reach that goal of 100,000, we'll give more this year to Annie Armstrong than we've ever given before. And if we reach our goal, we also will have established a great seed fund for church planting.
Yeah.
It's a bold goal. I hope our folks will see the value of that. I think of it in these terms. So the North American Mission Board offering, this Annie Armstrong offering, is not administrative, advertising, et cetera. It's to support church planters and missionaries, so we feel pretty good about that offering. But our only skin in the game there is just the check that we write, is the money that we donate, the cash that we give, or the credit card number, whatever it may be. That's skin in the game. This one is inclusive. We're going to be asking people, we want you to give, but we want you to give to something that we're going to ask some of you to serve in, maybe for a year to help it get started, maybe indefinitely, become a member there long term. Others, it's going to be to work on weekend projects, help it get established. It's just going to be sweat equity. Maybe that's swinging a hammer or flipping a paintbrush. There's a lot of roles here, a lot of things that can be done. We're going to be in it. It's going to be our baby. So I'm excited about that. My hope for this, Charles, is this first one would be precedent setting.
Yeah.
Because I'm hoping this would just be the beginning. I was reading about a church. Again, I posted this article on social media, so if anybody follows me on Facebook, you can find it. It was about a church plant in Austin, Texas, and talking about the sacrifices, and maybe they look like unlikely candidates for planting. But they'd already planted multiple churches. And, of course, then that brings us to this point. We're also trying to plant churches that will plant churches.
Yeah.
So we're trying to build that into them from the beginning. What you have been the beneficiary of, what you saw take place, now you get ready to do it again. We want this to be an ongoing movement.
Right, because that fits our, once again, that fits us putting our DNA into that church. Because if that's us, if we're a church planting kind of church, then our church plants hopefully will have that same kind of mindset towards church planting and towards missions. Hopefully it'd be great one day to be able to do, and I think this will happen, mission trips with these other partnering churches, and do things together that way. I think
wouldn't that be great if there was a
fellowship
network
way.
of just projects and things we do, or community projects, or community evangelism and outreach, that sort of thing. And let me say this, I never know exactly who's listening to our podcast here locally, other churches, ministry leaders. What we're talking about is multifaceted. So we're talking about, Lord willing, planting from the ground up brand new churches. A project we're working on right now is effectively a replant. It's taking what was a church that would cease to exist and then will be rebirthed as a new church with new DNA and new people, but in the physical location where it was. But in other cases, there may be some genuine revitalization where we would come alongside an existing congregation. So if there's some church leaders in the Wiregrass and beyond that would hear what we're saying, this is something we're very passionate about doing. If there are some congregations out there that are listening, wondering, just realistically, bluntly, can we survive another 3 years, 5 years? For some, maybe another year. Can we continue to go? But yet or you feel very strongly where you are, your community needs a viable gospel witness.
Yeah.
even if it's going to be small, even if the potential for growth is not great. We see no one's moving here, no new business coming here. That's not our concern. That's not our issue. We're not just looking for what's the fastest growing city in America. We're not just going to those places. I mean, we are in one of those largest cities, Manhattan. But if that's you, please, we welcome a conversation. Maybe we can come alongside you. And this can be in formal and informal ways. There's a church, a pastor we're meeting with right now. We're just offering to help. It's a single elder model, bivocational pastor. Well, what can we do for you? We can help you with some pulpit supply. We can help shore that up for you. Some of our knowledgeable people who do our sound and tech and all these things can go and help them and the setup of theirs. I mean, we can offer those kind of things. That's the sort of thing we want to be doing. How can we invest in the overall health of churches that are our neighbors and around us? We want to see all of them do well if we can.
Yeah, and so to think about the next steps for us, for the elders, you mentioned this a little bit Sunday night of us coming back with a formal proposal, which also has some action steps on it. So what are you thinking, or what are the elders working on right now to be thinking through as they go next step for the congregation? What do you think?
Well, we want to be able to present to the people as clear a package of what this looks like as we possibly can. So what are we asking you to commit to financially? What are we asking from the church? What's our goal in terms of people? Because this isn't just going to happen. Again, we're not just talking about sending a guy out there and hoping he can drum up a church. We're talking about sending a team of church planting team who will go, what those needs are. And then the rest are just looking through those necessary steps. One, making sure that the person that we're sending is trained up and prepared as an elder, making sure the team that we're sending is well prepared and trained up, the people that are from the existing church that will become one church with us, making sure we're all on the same page. So we'll go through a season of just refreshing, of renewed training. Let's make sure we're on the same page in terms of big picture things. What's a church? What's the gospel? What's a church for? How should a church order itself? How should a church function? How are we going to worship? How are we going to make decisions? All those critical things that let's make sure we're all on the same page, sharing that same basic culture. And then look towards some practical things. What are the next practical steps for us? Hands-on projects that we can all do together. And then you start dealing with some very specific things. What are we going to call the new work? And when will we relaunch the new work? And all those kind of things. But right now, we want to assess. All right, we want to tell you exactly what we're asking, and we need to know that. What are we stepping into? What are we asking from you, and what would that look like? What roles are there to be played, and who can possibly do them? Some of that we may have to recruit. It may not just be volunteers. We may have to be going to some people say, really feel like you could be a key person here.
Right.
Would you be willing to do that? And getting that buy-in. Once that buy-in is there, I feel like everything else can happen pretty rapidly.
Yeah. So hopefully, we'll go through spring break. We got a couple of weeks here between the schools when people's minds are all distracted, going other places with spring break, with family time. But after that, we'll come back and hopefully have a members meeting where we can have those specific plans ready for them and let the church vote, basically a resolution that says we resolve that we're going to plant a church, and then at that point, then we can start handling the other details of it. So.
Right, and the rest is just details. Doesn't mean they're minor details, but they're just details. The big issue is, will we commit to this? Will we commit to that challenge? And let me back up a little bit. Something I was mentioning a little bit earlier about sending out our best. It is a mentality shift, and to make sure everybody's real clear on that, it may mean that even staff that you really like, that's been beneficial to you or to your family, you've enjoyed working with, and you appreciate the longevity and the tenure, that may not always be the pattern. That we think it's good and healthy that we've got staff currently serving in second or third chair kind of ministry positions that really do aspire to be teaching elders, teaching pastors, want to be the lead pastor in a church setting. So we need to embrace that. As much as we will miss some of these guys, that is our aim. Our aim is to send some of these guys out.
Yeah.
So whether that's in an existing church that just needs a healthy pastor who's prepared and ready to lead, then that's fine, and we'll encourage them and help them, support them all we can in their new role there. Or if it's sending them out as one of our church planters, But just having that mindset, I don't want people to see it's a revolving door per se, but intentionally we want people in other staff positions, whether it's children or students or discipleship or missions or whatever it may be. We want people there who are going to be, not all of them, it's not a prerequisite, but that many of them, maybe a majority of them, will be sent out to pastor.
Yeah, it's
not pasture, pastor.
Yeah, and that goes back to part of that Calvary Next. One of the biggest words we heard in that over and over from ourselves, thinking about what we wanted to be, was a training center. And that's what that is, So we're maybe losing some because they are trained and ready, but what does that mean we need to be doing? We mean behind the scenes, looking at other men who can be raised up and be trained and all those kind of things to be ready to take the spots that are there.
Yeah, I feel like a little bit like a football coach now. The mentality needs to be for us next man up. We really need the next man up. You think about churches that have been through huge, just pendulum swings, paradigm shifts with new leadership and everything. Existing leader leaves, and then there's a large gap, and a church scrambles and assembles a search team, et cetera, tries to find a new leader, and then you don't know, is it going to work? Is it going to last? Is it going to be like us? Is it going to continue? Is it going to be discontinuity, et cetera? Our philosophy would be next man up. If an elder gets sent out, we've got other men ready to be trained up to take their place. If a life group leader goes, next man up. It would be the same thing from really in every position. If something happens to me today, then what happens at Calvary on Sunday? It's the next man up. It's an elder or a group of elders that are ready to step up, ready to step in, in every role. So that forces the issue, and we talk about this in staff sometimes, whether you're Randy leading the choir or Tommy leading missions, or we're all trying to prepare people who can take our places, who could, or if need be, any of us need to shift around. If something needs to happen where you need to, right now, you need to take that spot because that's where the great need is. Is there somebody that can step in? So always trying to I'm just reiterating what you're saying. We want to train up and then give them a legit place. Hey, it's great that you've learned to lead and preach and all those things. Sorry, we don't have a place for you to do it because I'm going to be doing it for the next dozen years. But no, is there a way? Is there an outlet? Can we be part of that? And the alternative to that is we just see our best people go out and it always does feel like a loss.
Yeah.
Man, I hate to lose them. I wish we could have had a place for them. I wish there would have been a place for them to serve here. Well, I think we're creating those places where we can and they can serve. So.
Yeah, the picture that we got at one of our conferences was the difference in a red dot and a green dot. We don't want to be a red dot church that is having to look for people to come into us all the time. We think we have a good biblical model of church health that can create green dots where we're sending people out and being a part of things outside of ourselves.
And, when we first started hearing that kind of idea, that kind of talk, it does challenge you to become that. If you're not that yet, then we need to become that. So our answer to that is if we feel like we're really not that yet or we're not ready for that, but then, man, we got to do all we can to get there. Yeah. And we got to be intentional about that. I had a conversation with two different guys in the last couple of weeks about, not young guys just like right out of getting ready to go into college or right out of college talking about ministry. I'm talking about middle-aged guys, middle-of-life guys. What role does the church play in my training? I think in the past, we would just always default to the seminary. If you're interested in church ministry, just go off to school and then, let us know how you're doing and let's see where you land, where you end up. I'm not opposed to seminary. I'm very in favor of it. And we have a well-trained staff in terms of, professional education, but nothing takes the place of local church ministry and service. And if we can't be training and, people up ourselves, then we're not succeeding. Yeah. So we want to be able to train those folks up. We want to train people up. I mean, I'm hoping that we'll have some stories to tell in the coming months that will be pretty exciting to people. And maybe there'll be some surprising things people hear. Well, I had no idea that person was thinking about church planting, or I had no idea that was a possibility. And again, Charles, it's not like we have insider information that no one else has. Like we know we've got this money just sitting there. No, we're going to have to say, listen, we feel like God's given us these opportunities, and we feel same things we preach. There's an urgency to this. How much time do we have left? We don't know. We don't know when that last day is. Can we take the opportunities that God has put in front of us?
Yeah.
And of course, because we believe so strongly in God's sovereignty, we're going to believe that God's not going to give us those opportunities until we're seeking them, praying for them, asking for them, and pre-obedient. Does he know that we're going to say yes to those things if he offers them? I mean, he's not just going to throw those things out there just to get our opinion on them. So, to pray with wisdom and discernment and be ready to say, okay, Lord, we're not sure exactly how, but yeah, we'll jump into that. We'll go for that.
Yeah, and I've always found, in the this I guess is a practical side, but also a faithful side, when our church has been asked to give above and beyond for like missions, and I would put church planning right in there, the church doesn't suffer. Our offerings don't suffer because God's faithful. And so when we step out and say we're going to do this by faith, we're going to raise this extra money, we're going to take up this separate offering, those are some of our best times financially because we're being faithful, and I believe that God is going to continue to bless us so we can bless others. And I think that's how he does it.
I had a conversation with somebody this week and was just talking about churches and church membership processes, and how do you, if you're new to a city or new to a church, how do you assess what's healthy? Is a church healthy or not? Is this a church I should join? And I thought it was pretty good and insightful. It's when we teach our membership class, I say the most important thing that you need to consider first in joining a church is, what does the church teach? Is the doctrine sound? Is the teaching right? But the second part of our membership class, though not as important, it's right there. I mean, just so neck and neck, because without it, it's still not a healthy church. And that's, what do you do? Do you do what you teach? Is the it's sort of like 1A and 1B in the equation. If you did good things but taught bad things, it wouldn't be a healthy church. But if you teach really good things and don't do anything that matches it, that's hypocritical. So that's unhealthy. So this is an opportunity for us to do the things that we have been teaching. We say things like this: God wants us to not just be a consumer of his blessings. And as individual Christians, as a church, let's not just consume the good things that God has given us. We have a lot of blessings here, whether those are resources or buildings or people. We have resources. We have people resources. Can we shift our mindset to being a conduit? Or what will we do? What will we do with an abundance of those blessings? And I want to particularly challenge any of our folks who are listening, or you in your own church if you're listening. If you're sitting, say, in a small group right now, or you're the leader of that small group, and you know full well in that group are 4 or 5 people who should be leading a small group. But week after week, becomes month after month, becomes years, it's all intake. It's all intake. Intake, discussion, that sort of thing. What's the remedy to that? Well, we could start more small groups, and we need some more, by the way. Some of you that are listening to this, we do need new small group leaders. We need to expand some of those. Some of our groups are too large to be a small group. They're big groups. We don't have a term for that in our vernacular. You won't see that on our next step saying, you can join a big group or a small group, or, we don't have big groups. We have the congregation. You need to be teaching. But another answer to that is, some of you need to be sent out as teachers, or some of you need to step up and do more. Some of you need to become elders. Some of you need to go out on mission somewhere. Some of you need to be part of a church planting team. Yeah. It's time to get in the game. Yeah. Use what God has given you. We've got some folks in our congregation that, they're well studied. They're well versed. They know stuff. What you going to do with it? What you going to do with that? How are you going to use that? How are you going to use that for the benefit of other people? Yeah. So I think that's what this church planning strategy process really gives us the opportunity to do. So we'll call it quits for today, and we'll wrap up. How many minutes was that? Like 140? Yeah, about 3 hours worth. We'll call it a day, and remember, we are for God, for Dothan, and for the world.